This is Revelation Response, a podcast where we talk about who God is, what He's done in our lives, and how we can't help but respond in worship. We want these episodes to be an encouragement, wherever you are in your faith journey, to pay attention to what God is saying to you and to consider how you might respond. Now, here's my conversation with Aaron Blanton. Hey, well, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Nate Souza, and I've got one of my closest friends in the world with me today. Aaron, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, you said my first name.
Did
Did have to work.
That's so good.
I'm Aaron Blanton, Nashville native, and pretty much. And I grew up here in Music City, and became a musician at an early age, and then became a professional musician by the time I was 17. And That was a wild experience. But I only say that, like, people ask me who I am. I spent a lot of time leaving all that stuff out. Right. No, who am I now? Well, that's true too. Who am I now? I'm a father, a husband, and I work at Fellowship, and I love my job in communications, with words and all that stuff. But the young me, still part of who I am, still true, was started off in music here in Music City.
Okay.
And became a drummer, pro drummer at a young age, was on the road until I was in my late 20s, and I got married, came off the road, and took a job at Friends Church in Yorba Linda and met this strapping young lad named Nate.
You may hear Aaron call me the Suze, and that may not have been on the podcast yet, but a long-term nickname.
I'll try not to use Nate too much because it feels weird.
Okay.
I mean, I know that's your name.
Right.
But.
So for those not aware, so when you say you were a professional musician, where did you start your career, and like where did that take you up until Friends? Yeah,
good question. For me, music was part of life, but it was also because of church. Mm-hmm. So grew up in a Christian family, great parents. You know my parents. Mm-hmm. And my sister, just amazing upbringing. I'm so grateful for that. And music was, everywhere in our family, but it was also a big part of church for us. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of churches. And being in Music City, it was just filled with all these great musicians. So I just jumped in, basically. The moment I could, I started playing at youth group. And, playing in like youth was a really good, just for like logistically good for learning how to play and how to be in a band. And because we're located in near Nashville, some professional musicians that were in DC Talk's band, if you remember the good old days of DC Talk, they went to my church, and we all went to church together.
That's right.
And they played in the band, and asked me if I wanted to audition to replace a drummer that was leaving. And I thought, there's no way. I'm 17. There's no way I'm going to get this. And but I ended up kind of like getting the gig, which was crazy to think about.
Was this for DC Talk, or was it different?
Well, okay, so that's interesting. Originally, it was auditioning for DC Talk.
Okay.
Because their drummer was leaving the road.
Okay.
And I thought, shoot for the moon.
Right, why not?
And I ended up, they were like, thanks so much for auditioning. We feel like your age is just like too much for us to, it's like a liability. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And so I went from there, and same guys had another band called Zilch.
Okay.
And so when they weren't on the road with DC Talk, the DC Talk's like touring band had formed a band called Zilch.
Okay.
And so there was obviously a vacancy there too in drums. Right. And so I tried out for that, and that's the gig I ended up getting. Gotcha. And fast forward a year, that band Zilch became Sonic Flood.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, same band.
So you were with Sonic Flood for a long time.
Well, yeah, a lot shorter than I had hoped.
Okay, right. Okay. Sounds like a story.
Yeah, probably a different podcast.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I was in Sonic Flood as an original member from 1997, I guess, or maybe something like that, to 2000-ish, 2001.
Okay.
Yeah. So right at the turn into the 2000s.
Okay. And where'd you go after Sonic Flood?
So I took a year off. And in that next podcast we do about the whole Sonic Flood story, I will share with you why I took a year off, but I needed it and I'm glad I took it. Yeah. So I got a couple of regular jobs.
Okay.
I'll tell you about sometimes. But
used car salesman.
Good guess. Oh man.
Shot in the dark.
Shoe salesman. I'll give you that. And I worked at UPS. Anyways, so from there, that year off was really good for me. And then almost a year to the day that I decided to not play professionally at all for a year. It was almost like a fast. Let's think of it that way. I got a call from this guy that owns a studio in Nashville, and he said, "Hey man, there's these guys in my studio. They're recording a record, and I think you'd really like them, and they need a drummer, and they need it now." And he said, "Just come down to the studio and say, hey, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work." And I came down and met a guy named Chuck and a guy named Kevin, and they had moved to Tennessee to start their they had gotten signed to a label here, and they were called By the Tree. And so I was in By the Tree basically from that time until 2007 when I moved to California.
Okay, and that was drums and also singing.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like it's a lot. I've had when I go and retell it, it's interesting to think about there's a lot of kind of little twists and turns, and I guess in all of our stories. Yeah. But for me, being a drummer was all I really ever cared about. I had no desire to be the singer. I could sing. I was melodic. I played guitar a little bit, and I was dabbling in songwriting, but it wasn't like something I cared about all that much, especially not being the front guy for a band, the main communicator. I loved playing drums and still do. And so, but through a lot of twists and turns internally in the band, the lead singer just decided his time was up for being on the road, started family, settling down, and that left a vacancy there. But we had, and I don't know, looking back, I wasn't ready for that. To take that role.
But there was a need.
But we had 6 or 8 weeks of camps or something coming up. And it was like, I just did it because that was a problem that needed to be solved and I could solve it. So literally he leaves the band, and 2 weeks later I'm standing in front of 600 high school students.
Hey, we're By the Tree.
I never led worship. I can't remember the chords. I don't know the songs.
Wow.
I know the drums.
Okay. Yeah. Helpful, but also not
really
pertinent
at that moment,
right?
So yeah, that was actually the beginning of worship leading for me. It was that moment.
Oh, gotcha.
That's where I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So we have to go somewhere. I have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And something was really alive in me at the same time of being scared. I was also very, invigorated by something.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what was going on.
Okay. So you're thinking, I want to get off the road. Move was on your mind, maybe looking at churches, that story, getting to friends from the road. What was behind that? That's a big change.
It is a big change. I would say, the one thing that sticks out in my mind as the main decision driver is the fact that I was having a child. Okay. We were having a child. Yeah. I was not actually having the child,
right.
But my wife and I, faced with this person that we were going to have to take care of and provide for, me being gone all the time didn't sound like the math works out to raise a child. Okay. And I just seen a lot of relationships and a lot of kids with parents that were on the road. It was hard. Yeah. And a lot of those marriages, unfortunately, didn't last. Right. And that wasn't for me. Okay. So on one hand, it was really easy to say, you know what, touring, maybe my touring days are done, On the other hand, it was really hard because now what do I do?
Right.
But that's where I got some advice from a friend of mine who said, have you ever, you spent all this time playing music in churches. Have you ever thought about, you've been singing, you've been doing this for a couple of years, you've been leading, you know how to talk and play the guitar and all that. That's like the main ingredients for a worship leader. It's got written all over it.
Right.
And he's like, I think churches would be interested in having someone like you with the road experience and the artist experience and songwriting and all the stuff that kind of comes along with being in a band.
Yeah.
They'd probably be interested in that. So I said, I don't know. I've seen too much at church. I've seen how the sausage is made. I'm not sure, this is for me. But my wife and I mean, we just spent a lot of time praying and a lot of time seeking counsel. I mean, we just didn't know what else to do but to ask for help from God and from people we trusted. And so a few weeks later, I found myself like writing my resume for the first time.
Right.
And my mom is really good at all this stuff. Is what she does for a living, is stuff in HR and all that stuff. And she said, if you want, I can help you. And here's what I would do. I would let's find 4 areas, contacts that you've had, and let's just send your resume to 4 different areas in the U.S. And you just pick them and send them your resume. And we did. And I got a call back from a guy at Friends Church. And I was like, what's Friends Church? I don't even know what Yorba Linda is.
So inviting.
Yeah.
Friends.
I feel okay. I'll take it.
Right. Yeah. I like Friends.
And Mandy and I flew out, and she was, you remember this, she was very pregnant.
8 months pregnant at Chili's.
Yes. I mean, where else do you eat?
Right, yeah.
Clearly you go to Chili's.
For an interview, yeah.
And I just remember going, I can see this. I can see myself doing this. And there was something really, really beautiful about the idea of, instead of going town to town, city to city, with no ability to develop anything deep with people or even build anything other than this road thing,
right?
And doing records, I was so drawn to the idea of working with the same group of people and doing something together and going the same direction as a group of people. I'd never had a real job at this point like that.
Gotcha.
So this was the first step into that. And so, I mean, we had our daughter, and 6 or 7 weeks later, we were packed up and on our way to Southern California from Nashville.
Yeah, which is where our stories
intersect
there, because I had been there for, I think, a couple of years at that point. And there's a guy from Nashville coming out to basically work arm in arm with you. Hope you like him. Cool. This will be fun, And it did work out, which is so good.
So did.
And continues to. But, when we met about this podcast, one of the things I asked you was there a catalyst event in the change that you made, or saying, I don't know, some under the waterline, we talk about at fellowship, like irk, whatever. And there was the story of this lady coming up to you. So maybe we can touch on that statement that she made about, I like your worship or whatever.
Yeah.
Like what did that statement kind of trigger in you or bring back from the past or whatever it was?
Yeah. It was this moment where some well-meaning person was coming up to me after a service to offer encouragement to me. But the way that she said it to me, and I believe her heart was probably not the way that I received it. Just want to say that. I believe what she meant was one thing, but the way I heard it, and maybe God used that as a moment for me. Looking back, I would say it was a critical moment, a crucial moment in my journey.
Yeah.
But she said, I just have to tell you, I love your worship. And I smiled and nodded, and I don't really remember what else. I probably said thank you and just kind of moved on. But I remember being like so, it was bothersome to me that she said that, but it was more like scary. It was like, oh no, what have I done for? What have I been doing on stage all this time that she can come say she likes to watch and see?
Right. Like, good for you that you're doing all this.
You're doing a great job doing that thing. And essentially your performance is great. And I went. And
this is probably, I don't know when this happened, but this is probably a couple years into, or more than that, into basically a job where, just to go back a little bit, you came in to a ministry that was solid, but sort of not, we didn't know about click and track. We didn't know about, production. We were building a new building. I mean, it was a huge transition time for the church. And so like you alluded to, like having a guy come in saying, okay, I know how production works. I know how bands form. I know even about, promotion or getting people excited about something. And so coming in to be sort of a lightning rod around a lot of those things was awesome. So I'm just imagining you going, okay, we've ramped up the production. Yeah. We're a lot more professional sounding, and we're projecting this off of stage. And now a woman's coming up saying like, yeah, the production, your thing is awesome. Was that sort of the disconnect of like, okay, this is not the point of all this?
Well, the reality of that moment was it was almost disorienting, almost confusing to me to be like, wait a second. That's not the response that I think. It's like, I don't know what maybe I was expecting. Right. But if she had been like, I feel like I'm connecting to God, or I feel like, or I'm experiencing a connection with God as we sing together as a church or something, that's a different comment. Right. But to say, I love your worship, it's like, she's been watching. Yeah. I've been doing something that's a spectacle that people, watch instead of, I'm maybe like over dramatizing it, honestly, but in the moment it felt like very, very disorienting to me to hear it that way.
Yeah. What you want is someone to come up and say, hey, your worship leadership helped me see Jesus or helped me engage with God in a way I haven't before. So thank you for just being a vessel. That's what we hope and pray for. So I can understand why that would be alarming or jarring to hear that. Oh my gosh. Because we've missed the mark somewhere. Yeah. How do we fix that?
Yeah, now what?
And so, is there sort of a slippery slope down from there in terms of, spoiler alert, you end up leaving that job, at Friends and coming out here. It's back to Nashville, and also having some issues around worship leading and wanting to not continue that vocationally. Maybe talk a little bit about some of that internal thing that you struggled with.
Yeah. Well, I think that was the catalytic moment, for sure, of like now I'm asking questions, trying to review back, like, what are we doing? Yeah. And it was so obvious to me that I had definitely pursued excellence and leveling up and original material and all those things for the church. And I think in some ways that was the direction it needed to go. We were able to help, turn Fringe Church, as part of like a new direction for the church. And it was a really fun time.
For sure, yeah.
But we were side by side and all of that stuff, making records and doing live events and all this stuff was really, really fulfilling. Yeah. But were we discipling people in following Jesus as they gather on Sunday mornings and at other times? I don't know. I think maybe that was happening as a byproduct somewhere, but it wasn't on the top of my mind. So the more I began to see that, the more I began to say, like, something's off.
Gotcha.
But I didn't go anywhere for a few more years at that point. But I did have this longing to plant roots somewhere. And I just felt like, for me, coming back to where I was raised was the place that I wanted to spend the rest of my life, or what I can see of it, sure. And so, but there was no opportunity. There was no way to get back here unless I wanted to get back into the music industry, and I didn't want to tour and all that stuff. And so I really didn't have any options, and just began to pray again and seek counsel to say, like, is this time to move? Is it time to go or time to stay kind of thing? Is this when I hunker down and stay at it and just put my shoulder to it and stay in? Or is this the time where I say, I think we've had a good run and it's okay. And I still have the ability to leave on good terms and stay friends, and all the relationships can stay intact, which is ultimately what happened. Fast forward, got a call from Fellowship Bible Church, a church that my parents went to, and they've gone here a long time, and over the course of a couple of different time periods. But interviewed for the worship pastor position in fellowship, got the job. We were excited. We moved back. But I realized really early on that leading worship for me was starting to feel like a drain. So again, I'm going, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Part of my role was to not lead all the time. We have a team model, and that's one of the things that I still love about fellowship. It's one of my favorite things I love is that it's not just one leader every Sunday or one teacher every Sunday. We have a plurality of leaders that do these things, like elders. And it's a really, really healthy model. And it keeps people, I think we have can have our longevity. We keep longevity. We can do things for a longer period of time because we're sharing the work of the church together. And so I wasn't leading as much, really at all. Really, I mean, I led a few times, but really my job was to run the ministry of worship and arts and fellowship, which I loved. And the more I got into it, the more I felt, especially when I would lead, I felt this like disconnect in standing on stage and like the responsibility of like all of that was going on in the room. And just the grind of Sunday.
So speaking of grind, so you talked about being an Enneagram 3. So for those unfamiliar, the crash course on a 3 is?
Well, I'm a recovering self-image addict. And so for me, it was so helpful to give me language about what is going on inside me. Why do I make decisions like this? Why do I think like this? Like, what is happening? Like, why do I respond to people that way? Why do I self-protect when something dings my self-image? Like all that stuff. So image and show and professionalism, those are like, I mean, it's like being an addict. If you're a 3, it's that thing that can just, you crave it. And for me, I don't know that I would be able to, I wouldn't have been able to say, 6 or 7 years ago, I really care about my self-image to the point to where I worship how you want me to look.
Like
I want to manage that.
Super important.
So that's one thing that happens when you're on a stage is like, I'm actually good at that. I'm actually good at being in front of people.
Right.
Because I can turn on something. But is that what is most beneficial to build up a church?
So celebrity Christian leadership has been all the rage lately. Went through the rise and fall of Mars Hill. We've talked about the fall of all these great pastors across the country and internationally, it's been something I've been struggling with a lot in terms of even how we project worship from the stage or teaching or whatever. It's even debriefing a worship service can have its like pitfalls, of like what worked or what didn't work, or did that moment land or whatever. It's part of our job is to A, plan those things and execute them, and then B, look back and say, could we have made that better? And one of the as you know, I've been at Lipscomb teaching worship classes, on the side. And one of the things that came up in one of the classes talking to the students was you can plan, execute, and debrief a service and not be a Christian.
My goodness.
And these students are already seeing that. It's like there's a cold, detached way that you can do ministry, and you can make moments because we're crafty and we have ideas, creative, and they land and they, affect people and all that stuff. And that, like you said a word earlier, it's scary. Like that's a scary thing to hear because it's like, okay, I don't feel like that's where I'm at or our team is at all. But by the grace of God, we can go there. We can forget our motivation and the reasons why we're doing all these things. And so this conversation came up too about like if Coldplay is over here on the left, and like a family around a piano is on the right, singing Christmas carols or whatever, the church is basically presenting like we're Coldplay. We got the lights and we got the projection and like the haze and the moving, whatever. But really, I think we're called more to be this family surrounding a piano, just singing because we love singing, singing because we love being together. And for us as Christians, singing because God deserves our response. I mean, that's the part of this podcast is saying, we look at who God is, we look at what he's done for us, we can't help but respond in worship.
That's right.
That can easily be distorted and bypassed by church production, and so it's kind of a warning shot to those that are in on stage leadership, that if you're not constantly thinking about the person in the seats and how are they perceiving me, how am I pointing them back to Jesus, that can be such a slippery slope,
which to that point, man, like I think what was going on, particularly for me as a worship leader, was that I didn't do the part B of those two questions you just asked. Like the way you said it, I'm not butcher it, but like you said, like, how are they perceiving me and am I pointing them to Jesus? I just said, how are they perceiving me?
Right.
I don't know that I knew that. I don't know that it would meant sinister, like evil.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have it on my mind because I was thinking about, are the lights right? How's the mix?
Yeah.
Do my ears sound weird today?
Totally.
God, my mic is so annoying. What is that weird buzz?
Right.
Oh, man, I should have wore different boots. It's like I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about how I look, how I sound. And what that does is puts all the pressure on me to perform something and to be good at it.
Right.
And it's no different than sports or anything else, but just for my personality, it's a monster that I had to figure out a way to stop feeding.
Yeah. That's a good segue into what did you do next? So you're a worship leader. You have been for maybe 10 years at that point, 7 at Friends and a couple at Fellowship. So you're thinking there's a monster. It's down there deep. I'm struggling back and forth with it. What was the ultimate decision to say, I'm going to stop being a worship leader vocationally?
Yeah. Well, it was a few things. One was that, so at the same time where I'm recognizing this monster, I also am feeling the grind of Sundays. I'm just feeling that, just really like in my physical body, just like, man, I feel like the only thing I'm thinking about is what is happening on Sunday. And I guess missing the other part of church is the Monday through Saturday part of it was like, how do I fit into that?
Right.
Like you don't even know what it's like to sit out there, And so at the same time, the monster conversation is going in my head. So it's the grind thing and that just the cyclical nature of it and wanting, I felt like I needed out. And then literally in the same kind of season, I was presented with an opportunity to step in to lead some changes in the communications department at Fellowship. And just because of band experience and just working with, labels and, words and songwriting, I've always been really, really interested in marketing and communications and websites and graphic design and how it communicates things. And so I really essentially jumped in to help bring some change to the communications department, but not thinking it was going to be something that I wanted to do long term.
Gotcha.
But when I got into it, I was like, oh my goodness, I actually really, really love this a lot. And it was in that moment I went to my boss and I said, I think I would love the opportunity to keep doing this, but I don't know that I can do both and do them well. But I don't want to not do communications. Are you understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like, asking without asking.
Yeah.
And Fellowship graciously gave me an opportunity to step into a role that on paper I was not qualified for and have given me an opportunity to learn and to be creative still and to exercise some gifts that I don't think I would have had the opportunity to as a worship leader, as a worship pastor, because there's just different, they're connected, but they're different worlds, they're different roles, you know?
Yeah, you said the word creative, which you're a very creative person, obviously, in music and then also like design. And you've always had, I think, an eye for aesthetics and just how things feel and look,
Love all that
and
stuff.
so going out of the music world, that was another part of when we talked about doing this episode was the ways in which people respond to God. You know, so obviously God is great and wonderful and beautiful and, you know, gracious to us and all of these things, what he did on the cross. We look at the magnitude of who God is, right? And we talked a little bit about our response being in proportion to that, you know? So we see all that and we say, okay, how can I not respond, you know, to what God has done in my life and who he is, how he loves me. And so one of the pitfalls, you know, that the church can do is say, the response is to sing, you know, or the response is to take sermon notes, you know, or whatever. And so like what a good Christian will do to respond, you know, and honestly, that conversation with you was just another eye opener to me on, as worship leaders, we have sort of put that up on a pedestal saying this is the best response possible that we would have, you know, 600 people singing their guts out on a Sunday morning, which is a response and wonderful.
Sure.
You know, but maybe talk a little bit about part of your desire for the church to broaden that or to expand, you know, what is acceptable as a response or even through design and beauty and other forms of response. Yeah.
You and I have both had conversations where we're just so frustrated that we did all this work and we created these events and either there was a low turnout or a bunch of people came and it was just like it was like, why did they show up?
Right.
And I think that I've played a big role in creating culture like that as a worship leader because my eyes are fixed on the wrong thing, right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
And I think for the change that happened in my life, I'm still trying to make sense of all this. I mean, I'm like in the journey.
Yeah, it's like not a finished
no,
story.
I don't have this all figured out at all. I'm guilty of having been the responsible leader looking at a room full of people and going, put your hands up. That's how you respond to God.
Yeah.
Clearly, we're singing songs here, people.
Right.
Open your mouth, make a joyful noise.
Yeah.
And yes, that's true. And is that the only way? Have we truncated or limited response to God in the worship service, in the room with people? What if the response of worship to the revelation of God, someone's response needs to be to go find someone or make a phone call and just ask for forgiveness? What if it's like, I just need to sit down. I'm just broken. I'm tired. I've had a hard day or a hard life right now, or there's a broken relationship that has wrecked me.
Yeah.
And you've got a worship leader putting expectations on you saying, no, but you have to raise your hands. That's surrender.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. I understand all the metaphors and the beauty of surrender and our hands in the air, and I think there's a time for it. Is that the only way a person can respond?
Right.
It's more of a question, I think, that I've begun to ask now that I haven't been, you know, vocationally a worship pastor or worship leader for a while. I haven't actually led worship in almost a year, a little over a year. And that was a choice I've made just to further step into I don't want to say step away, but I guess step into whatever God has for me somewhere that only he can see. But I just know Sunday mornings, last Sunday, I'm standing in worship service at fellowship and it's all there. It sounds good. It feels good. Great songs. Love the new song. The room's full. There's the palpable like energy that you get when like everybody's back from vacation. And it's like all the things, all the ingredients are there. And I just didn't have it. I didn't have the whatever I was supposed to have to like make that joyful noise. And I just stood there, and for me, the response was when we got to the Lord's table, which I believe was at the end, all the way at the end.
Yeah.
That's the moment for me where I closed my eyes and I said, this was for me. That was my moment of a revelation and response. Right. It wasn't in the music, and it wasn't in the sermon.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the gathering of the people or the awesome greeters and parking people, all the ingredients to make church great, because it is great. I love my church. I'm proud of my church. But my response was to remember to taste terrible wafer cracker and that nasty juice.
Right.
I want to go back to the real thing.
Yeah, please.
In the McElements and remember that a long, long time ago, Jesus Christ broke bread and drank wine. And he said, this is my body. This is my blood. For me, that was my response moment. So that's where I closed my eyes and I took a really deep breath, which further intensified the taste of the cracker and juice.
To reiterate.
Yes. I just want to make sure. Can we do something about that? Yeah. That's my moment. And I went, and knowing we were going to talk about this today, I just go, gosh, I want to give people, what if the church was a place where people felt free instead of limited to respond one way? I wonder if maybe not hands would come out of pockets, but like if people would be standing there and going, my response in worship is to go pray for that person 8 rows, 26 chairs away from me that I know is going through a nasty divorce. Yeah. Maybe that's my response.
Yeah, caring for someone else as a response.
And let the songs be playing around you and let all the things be happening. What if we were marked by that? Yeah. And I can't think of something more beautiful to stand on a stage and see happening in the seats from a worship leader's bird's eye view. Right. To look and go, oh my gosh. Yeah. That's also responding. Yes, is singing response? Of course it is. No question. Scripture, it's there.
Yeah, and we're not really downplaying that as much as we are wanting to elevate those other responses, Yeah, the phrase that came to mind when you were talking about what we're supposed to do versus a real response is the phrase like only real responses allowed. Like, I wish we could put that on our church
wear
wall.
That t-shirt.
When you walk in, hey, only real responses are allowed here. Nothing supposed to or nothing because your neighbor did it or that's the good Christian way.
Imagine with me if when you walk into church on Sunday, the first thing you heard was, whatever you think you're supposed to do in here, take a deep breath. And just know that responding to God and worshiping him or hearing his word taught, it's going to look a bit different for us. But what we find when we're given permission to like breathe a little bit is we respond differently.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's in line with what God would want. Is whoever you are, however you are, bring your full self to me, and let the real response through. It's so good. Like, what would God want as a response when he looks down at his creation, who he loves?
Man, great question. Jeez.
Does he just want singing? That seems ridiculous when you put it on God. Like, all I want is for you guys to sing louder, you know? Obviously he wants our hearts. He wants our relationships to be healthy. He wants our parenting to be godly. He wants our, all of these things. He wants us to be more like him, and to look just like Jesus. And so like we're starting this John series at church talking about following Jesus, and there are so many responses. I mean, that's something I want to dig deeper in these podcast episodes is like the way we respond to God can look so different depending on the person, their personality, how God's wired them, all that,
Sure.
And so not to basically limit that in and say, this is the way that you do it. This is the right or wrong way,
Yeah.
So now maybe we can end with talking about what you're doing now. So you're back playing with an artist, doing drums and not. So what has that experience been like for you in terms of, it's almost a full circle moment. Like now you're back, not on the microphone, back on the drums, kind of like you started, playing worship music. How's that been different for you or refrain? Yeah.
I think it's been really refreshing to not feel like I've got to turn it on. Yeah. I'll tell you this, a tiny side note is where I still feel where I go into self-protect mode, manage my image, is when I'm in church and I'm not doing what the I guess the expected response would be from a guy like me who's been a worship leader and has led a fellowship and works there.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel it like the most. Like I can take my hands out of my pocket and close my eyes and look like I'm responding because I know what to do, but my heart is nowhere near that.
Yeah.
That's not what my heart is crying out. Now, there are moments where that is my response.
Right.
And that's when I respond.
What a beautiful name.
Yeah. Oh, the bridge of what a beautiful name gets me every time. I just without, I mean, there's tears in my eyes every time. And so those moments, it's like, well, yeah, that's my response.
Yeah.
And so playing drums again, playing drums again in so many ways was kind of like riding a bike. But like you said, it's full circle because it is worship, which is where I got my start as a musician. And I have a really simple job to do. You know, the rest is on him. It's, you know, it's not my thing.
Right.
I don't have anything to do except play what I'm supposed to play when I'm supposed to play it.
Yeah.
And obviously still full-time at fellowship and loving communications and like crafting words and, you know, messaging and all that stuff has been so refreshing for me because I don't feel the constant monster trying to get out of perform.
Yeah.
Do it to make yourself look good. I get to say, I think the health of an Enneagram 3 comes when they can say, you know what? I love helping someone else look awesome.
Right.
And
yeah. A lot of people don't even know what you do at fellowship, you know, or like what the role is or what it entails.
which I love.
Yeah. Polar opposite from before.
So
hey, aren't
great.
you that guy on stage? Yeah.
Well, there's so much of, I think some people can handle it so much better than others. For me, I felt like I had a target on my back.
Yeah.
All the time.
That's a good distinction to make.
All the time.
And for each person to really ask themselves that question, where am I on this? Am I good? Then great, you know, or do I have the struggle? Like, don't ignore it.
Yeah.
Look inside and say, hey, where am I really, how am I doing on this? You know, that's
I had a friend the other day say, man, you can make a lot of money leading worship.
Wow.
And for me, I went, I know, and I don't want it.
You're just highlighting the problem.
I don't want it. That's I know I can make money doing it. I know there are places I can go play and make money and all that. But my heart, I can't deny and ignore and pretend that my heart isn't, I'm not there for that, for the right reason.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing it, you know, to serve and to lead people based on where I'm at right now. It's not, God's working on me. He's doing something in me, and it would be a mistake for me to try to get ahead of that.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say to you, man, like, as someone that's walked alongside you, like, through these years, you know, I think you were such an example to a lot of us coming in with your skill and with the way that you kind of taught, especially at Friends, taught us to up our game and do all that stuff. You know, there's an admiration in a positive way. I don't mean like a idle way, you know, that comes out of that. But I would say that's continued watching you walk away from it in a different way, you know, because then I'm seeing a person saying, like, I could do this until I retire and just ride it out, even though my heart's not in it. And you said, no, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? And so I just wanted to say to you, man, there's a whole nother level of like admiration for that. And it puts it back, the onus back on me to say, if I feel like that, do something about it. You know what I mean? And don't let it get to the point where it's just, I'm phoning it in, or I'm dead in how I feel, but I'm just pretending. Yeah. I'm so proud that you saw that and said, that person is not who I want to be.
Yeah.
God made me to be like this. And so I'm going to follow that. So
that other person scares me.
Yeah.
It scares me to death.
Right.
I really appreciate you saying that because it's not, I don't know that I like made a decision. You know, it's like a series of choices that I just kind of have gone, that's not right. Something's wrong. And the like self-promotion and image management is exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. And that monster is dangerous. And that maybe that's why I felt like I had a target on my back all the time. It's because I did,
Totally.
It's a ticking time bomb. Another way to say it, that there's for a guy like me with the different types of struggles that I have and the way I'm always wanting to make sure that you're liking what you see, especially a few years ago. I just don't know that that's the guy I want to just be all the time and feed into that and live into that when there's this big God we serve. And I don't have to perform for him.
Yeah.
He never ever said, do it the right way, Aaron.
Right.
Or I can't accept you.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah.
In fact, he said, because you can't do it the right way, Aaron, I made a different way for you.
Yeah.
And it's at the moment, it's like I feel like I just got saved. That's kind of how I feel. It's like I feel like a new believer in a lot of ways. Where I'm going, I'm not afraid to say, God, I can't lead worship. And he goes, yeah.
I don't need you to.
It's okay.
Right.
And you know what? I still love you. I loved you when you were a terrible worship leader.
Yeah.
And I loved you when you got good at it. And I've loved you when you were phoning it in. And I loved you when you stopped. And I love you now. And I'll love you then. And I would say what that reveals is his commitment to me, which I don't know why, but that's always been something that feels far away. It's like, I know God loves mankind. And I know he loves you.
Right.
But when it gets to me, it's like, he gets hit or miss. Yeah. He could take me or leave me.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. So for God to speak into that and say, I do see you, I do love you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. Well, dude, thanks for coming on here today and just talking about your story. And I know it's vulnerable to go back to all the nooks and crannies of who you are and how you got to where you are today. But that was just cool just to hear it in one sitting, see what God has done through your story, man. Yeah. And like we touched on, it's not over yet and what is coming down the road. So
I'm excited about this podcast because I think revelation and response are a topic that Christians need to be thinking through and asking themselves what they're feeling when they experience something of God. What's actually going on in me, and how do I respond to that?
Right, because we can go through our whole lives never asking that question.
So I just celebrate your idea to go. We need to promote this conversation.
Right, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it, and let's get real stories in here. I think it's going to help people move along in their faith journey. It's discipleship. So
that's awesome.
I'm excited for you, and I'm proud of you, man.
Free plug. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll see you in the next episode.
Revelation Response is produced by Fellowship Bible Church and Fellowship Songs. You can check us out online at fellowshipbiblechurch.org or by searching Fellowship Songs wherever you stream your music. Also, please leave us a like and give us a follow to hear more episodes like this. Thanks for listening.